So today we have with us Captain Don Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us. You are renowned at traveling to the deepest part of the ocean, going to Antarctica close to 30 times, the Arctic, all over the world. You've been an award winner for National Geographic, Rolex. You are, I believe, the president of the Explorers Club. Honorary president of the Explorers Club, and especially on January 23rd in 1960, you made a deep dive to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. I think that is an amazing feat.
Well, you know, us seniors have to be somewhere, so I think that's a pretty good catalog of somewheres.
Yes, it is, sir. Very, very much so. Well, I'm going to start our conversation today with a couple of props, because it makes me allow you to tell me what you think about things.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with this little styrofoam cup right here. This actually went to the bottom to the USS Macon, a dirigible that's actually right out here in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary in 2006. Can you tell me what you think of this when you see it?
Well, these are favorite trophies of those of us involved in deep ocean diving, because this is just your standard foam coffee cup. But after you expose it to pressure, they get kind of tiny. The thing we used to do that was a lot of fun is take these heads that they use in beauty shops, you put wigs on them so that they can do them for women, and paint them all up, and then you have shrunken heads.
Shrunken heads. In
fact, I had customs ask me, I came back from a diving operation on the Titanic, and we had a bunch of these in our carry-on bag because they're a bit fragile. And he said, "What have you got in there?" And I said, "Well, they're shrunken heads." And he thought, "Aha, this is my retirement scheme. I caught somebody with a lot of,
shrunken heads
stuff
in your bag.
Coming in." Yeah, but these are a lot of fun, and this is just a standard foam cup like we've all used for drinking coffee, except these elegant ones you have here, and they're quite nice trophies. We take like a bag, a mesh bag you buy onions in the store, and then we fill them up full of these big cups and hang them on the outside of the submersibles, and down they go. But even if we took this, now the Macon is not very deep, but if you took this down to say 8 or 9, 10,000 feet, it'd be same size, because it's the air that's in the pores inside the cup, and it can only compress so far. So this could have gone down 7 miles and it looked the same way.
Looked the same way.
Even though it went just a fraction of that distance.
Right.
So those are a lot of fun to have and make good souvenirs for people.
Right, well, thank you. And so I guess I'm going to go from that to this. This is a cover of Life magazine in 1960, Undersea Adventures and Their Strange Craft. So if you had taken that down in this, the Trieste, to the bottom of the ocean with you, what size would it be? The same size?
Same size, but these hadn't been invented yet.
Right.
We're talking 52 years ago, and we really didn't have these things. And so this is a rather new development, just the last 20 years or so.
Well, this is a pretty impressive feat right here. What
does
it mean to you to see that?
Two ways it was an impressive feat. One, because the story was there. I wrote it just 2 weeks after, but it was my first big literary feat, a cover story in Life magazine. That's as good as it gets in those days. And that was a lot of fun doing that story. And I hand out copies of it because it's the closest recollection I've had. You know, half century later, I don't remember most of the stuff that's in the story, but it's all here because it was 2 weeks after we made the dive.
Right. Well, could you tell our viewers a little bit about your life growing up? I know you're from the San Francisco area here in California.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to want to work or live with and around the ocean?
Well, I grew up in the Bay Area during the Depression years, and we lived up in the Berkeley Hills, and the place we lived in had a splendid view over the bay. In fact, we couldn't afford what they call a Rector set. You know, kids make things with them. I guess Legos today, but I had the big one because I could look out through the Golden Gate and I watched them build the bridge. So you know, in large, I had a chance to see that wonderful construction. But I'd see all these ships coming and going through the Golden Gate straight out to the west, and they disappear. Of course, curve of the Earth. And I thought, I wonder what's out there. And I found out. I always wanted to be a sailor. I mean, I grew up around ships in the bay, joined the Navy as soon as I could. I was enlisted for a couple of years before I went off to the Naval Academy. And, you know, just the one thing I always wanted to do.
Right. So in that, from there you excelled to the rank of captain through 2 different wars and then eventually to be a submariner. Can you tell us a little bit how you ended up signing up for this crazy project to go to the bottom of the ocean? I mean, who would want to do that?
First of all, submariner is not a term we use. That implies an inferior mariner. Oh. Submariner, one who submarines. Now the Brits say submariner, so you're half right. If we were doing this in London, you'd be right on, and I wouldn't say anything. But submariner. Okay. Yeah, I got into that as soon as I could in the Navy, and I enjoyed motoring around underneath the ocean. Submarines, it was a grand life, great people. The submarines I served in we call smoke boats. They were diesel submarines. I was never in the nuclear program. And we could dive all the way to 300 feet. And that was what we call test depth. That was the maximum depth we could do. And some of the newer diesel subs that were built towards the end of World War II were 400 feet. Okay, I volunteered for this program called the Bathyscaphe Trieste. I don't know what bathyscaphe means. I could barely pronounce it. Trieste I knew was someplace in Italy. And I was serving in a submarine in San Diego, and they asked for volunteers for that program. And it sounded interesting, although I didn't really know what it was. And I put my hand up, and I got selected. And it wasn't because I had any special attributes, it's because they only had one volunteer. And I think the population of eligible people that could volunteer, the lieutenants in the Navy with Gold Dolphins as qualified in submarines, was probably around 60. So that would have been the pool. But only one put his hand up, me. I found out bathyscaphe comes from 2 Greek words, bathos, deep, scaphos, boat. And Trieste, in fact, was named after the city in Italy where it was constructed. And I joined that project at the Navy Electronics Laboratory in San Diego, California in December of 1958. And by March of '59, I had made a dive to 4,000 feet off of San Diego. Now, I'm a guy that's been going to 300 feet in military submarine. So 4,000 feet, that was really something. Yeah. Then it was revealed to me that our masters in the Navy had this idea of diving to the deepest place in the world ocean, 36,000 feet, roughly. That got my attention because since I was the military commander of the Trieste, I'd be in it. So now I'm going from 300 feet in a military submarine to maybe 36,000 feet in something I can't pronounce. And I did it all in 12 months. Now, I joined the program in December of '58. In January of '60, 13 months later, I'm on the bottom of the ocean at that depth. So it was fast-tracked, as they say today.
It's almost like training for a marathon.
Yeah, right.
So what's amazing to me is you obviously did this with Jacques Piccard, that your partner in crime, to go to the bottom of the ocean. What was it like when you were descending?
Well, first of all, Jacques Piccard was the son of the inventor, Auguste Piccard, a wonderful, absent-minded professor sort of guy from Switzerland, physicist, contemporary of Einstein and people of that era in physics. And he had this idea for an underwater balloon, because that's the principle of operation. It's just the same as a balloon that goes up in the sky. It's got a float, which is lighter than water, and you hang a cabin underneath it for the people. And when the Navy, the Office of Naval Research, bought the Trieste from the Piccards, they hired Jacques Piccard as a consultant to come over and show us how to operate and maintain it. So we had taken it out to the island of Guam in the middle of 1959, and we'd done progressively deeper test dives. The first one was 400 feet in the harbor at Guam, and by the end of the year, December of '59, we had gotten down to about 18,000 feet. And then January of 1960, we got to 24,000 feet. And then 2 weeks later, everything was working good. We made the deepest dive. And I made, of course, all of these dives with Jacques. We were co-piloting the Trieste. And the dive itself was about 9 hours. It took us about 5 hours and some change to get down because we had to go very slowly. We didn't exactly know how deep things were. And we spent a half hour on the bottom, and the rest of the time was coming back up.
Oh, wow.
But really, once we got clear of the surface, we went down rather quickly, and after about 500 or 600 feet, it was pitch black, absolutely black. So I mean, we could have stopped on a some kind of platform and just stayed there for that many hours, and the outside sensation would have been the same, pure black. We have lights, of course, we could look out, but there was no daylight filtering down.
So when I read another place, when you hit bottom, you kicked up dust, so you couldn't even really see anything when you're at bottom anyway.
Well, every landing we'd made with the bathyscaphe, we would stir up some bottom sediment when we landed, because that bottom sediment right at the interface between the ocean and the seafloor it's almost soupy. So it'd boil up. In a few minutes, it would drift away because there's always currents at any depth in the ocean. So we anticipated that would happen, but what we did not anticipate is it would not drift away. It was so fine, and it was almost like somebody had painted the viewport of our submersible with white paint. And so after a half hour, nothing was perceptible outside. We knew we had to go and get back up to the surface because it is wintertime and the day's only so long. We have a seagoing Navy tug ship, and we have to hook up the tow to the TRIAS. People actually putting their hands in there and hooking this thing up. And we wanted plenty of daylight. Didn't want somebody losing a hand because we wanted to stay on the seafloor longer. So we sort of had a dive profile of about 9 hours from the time we began the dive until we had to be back on the surface. So once we used up nearly a half hour on the bottom, we just had to leave and go back up. So the first photograph ever taken, deepest place in the ocean, was taken by a Japanese unmanned submersible, ROV, remotely operated vehicle, called Kaiko, which is a Japanese word for trench. And that was 1995, so 35 years after we were down there. Kaiko went down, no people in it, they could park it there, and they finally got some pictures of the seafloor.
Well, when you came back up to the surface, you know, what were the two of you's thoughts when you hit the surface?
Well, when we got back up to the surface, we couldn't see any of the ships, so that was our first concern. Because we're 200 miles off of Guam, and a little tiny thing that's barely sticks up above the surface of the ocean. We're sitting topside on top of it, which is, this picture here was taken after we got to the surface. So the two of us are sitting here waiting for to be picked up. The reason we couldn't see anything is our horizon was only 2 or 3 miles away, and they were just outside. We had airplanes out there too. Well, Jacques, when do you think somebody's coming back? And we talked back and forth. We said, well, maybe 3 years. Instead, it was 52 years.
52 years. Why do you think? Why did people just abandon the thought of exploring the ocean?
There's a reason for it. I used to say lack of public will and space has taken all the money and so on. It's not true. The fact is that if you can dive to 20,000 feet, say 2/3 the maximum depth of the ocean, if you can dive that deep, you can look at 98% of the seafloor in the world ocean. Only 2% is deeper than that last third. So if you're in the business of designing and paying for and operating something, and it's cost benefit, if you will, you can pay for 2/3 of the depth capability and have 98% of the seafloor to look at. It's only the deep ocean trenches, that last 2%. It's not saying they're not important to look at, but today you see there are, I think, 6 manned submersibles in the world that are clustered around a depth capability of 20,000 feet. The latest is China. They've got one that can dive to 23,500. So they have China has the deepest diving manned submersible in the world. They just did their final dives last June. So you've got Russia's got 4 of them, France has got 1, Japan has got 1, and China, so 7 of them right now. And that's why they're all clustered around that depth capability. You can do a lot of science at less cost. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be at least a few platforms in the world that can go to the ultimate depth with people. As Jim Cameron said after the deep dive, I was with him at Guam in March of 2012 when he made the next deepest dive. And I was with him at some event where I thought he nailed the idea, the concept very, very nicely. People always say, why man? The space people, that's been going since the first space mission when a monkey went up. Why human? Why don't you have a robot? And that's, you know, big argument, both sides. But I thought Jim said it very well. What kid wants to grow up to be a robot? And I thought, that's really correct. The trained mind and the trained eye inside the ocean, and just the whole attraction of humans doing these things, like when Neil and Buzz went to the moon, you know, we look up there and there's people there.
Right.
And same thing in the deep ocean, except that what we do is not very dramatic in the sense of a space launch. I mean, you've got all of that. They've got these wonderful space suits on, everything looks sexy, a lot of noise and flames and a lot of chat. What we do, you know, 1 minute it's there, next minute it's just a cloud of bubbles and we're gone.
Right.
So we're not very sexy.
Well, it's interesting that you compare the surface of the moon with the deep ocean, and actually it's said that we know more about the surface of the moon than we even do the deep ocean.
We have better maps of Mars than we do of the floor of the ocean. We're only about 10% of really exploring the world ocean. Big job.
Right. So, well, in saying that, I think you're part of this group called Ocean Elders, of which quite a few of those people are here today for this week for the Blue Ocean Film Festival, Dr. Sylvia Earle and Robert Ballard. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what the importance of that group is? Yeah, there are about 11 of us, and basically they've picked people or invited people to join who can take direct action, meaning that instead of forming committees and doing congressional testimonies or committee testimonies at the UN, you can pick up the phone and talk to the Prime Minister of Iceland or President of Iceland, or one of our members might be able to pick up the phone and talk to Mrs. Clinton about issues, ocean issues. And so we have people from governments, from the private sector, from entertainment, top people who can get their calls returned, if you will. So it's direct action in that sense, that they're all concerned. I mean, the musicians involved with us, Neil Young, Jackson Brown, they can pick up the phone and talk to top people, want to hold a benefit. Yeah, you've got Richard Branson, Ted Turner, Queen Mother Noor of Jordan, Sylvia, myself, Jean-Michel Cousteau, Sven Lindblad, a pioneer of adventure tourism. And the whole idea is to be able to network in at the highest levels and get things done. And this was formed on, modeled after something called the Elders, where the senior statesmen all over the world, like Desmond Tutu and people of that sort, get together and discuss how they can be useful. Where if just a little nudge for something, I don't see that we're going to initiate programs, but where there are things that are sort of pregnant, ready to go, we can maybe help. Right. Well, you know, I have to say it's been an amazing career for you, and I relate you to this Shackleton of the
No, hardly. But I'll say never bored.
Yeah.
And just looking around, you know, the next corner, over the next hill.
Right.
And I guess that's a life habit you never get over.
Right. Well, I have to say, everyone has a bucket list.
Yeah.
I mean, your list is so long. Is there anything that you have left that you want to still do?
Well, it's going to seem strange, but space. I'd like to just go out there and have a look. I mean, 71% of our planet covered by that ocean, and I'd like to just put it at arm's length for a couple hours. I did all my thesis dissertation work when I was doing my doctorate in oceanography in remote sensing of the oceans. I used to brief the Apollo astronauts. I was at Texas A&M, so I was just up the road from Houston, and brief them on imagery that I thought would be good, make good ocean imagery, show things that we've never seen in all one image. And I worked in that for 3.5 years, and had hoped to go into as a space astronaut oceanographer, the first oceanographer in space, but it didn't work out, and I went back to submarine Navy. And so that's in my bucket list, because it's still in my future.
There you go.
Yeah.
Does your wife ever ask you to retire?
No, I just keep, she says, act your age. And I say, well, I like that Peter Pan fella. He never wanted to grow up. So.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you have it. So we all thank the ocean for something. What do you thank the ocean for?
Thank it?
Yeah.
Well, it's given me, I've been able to dine out on it for 53 years. The things I've done, you know, like this, I come to these things and talk about my favorite subject, the oceans. And so it's given me a life, I suppose, in sense of professional and vocation and avocation. In my case, have fused. I used to get embarrassed to get paid for some of this stuff. Having so much fun.
Yeah.
But you know, you mentioned my wife a moment ago. I mean, she's in the middle of a lot of this stuff. She's made 12 expeditions with me to the Antarctic, and she's been to the North Pole with me once, and so on. So she knows if she just hangs on, I'll take her to interesting places,
Well,
like Monterey.
Well, there you go.